Welcome to the Teachers Talkin' podcast, hosted by Dustin and Ghazali Abdul Wahab. In this podcast, we discuss all things education and teaching, from innovative teaching methods to challenges to strategies and much, much more. In this discussion or roundtable-based podcast, we bring in educators from all around the world to talk about a variety of education topics so that we can support as many teachers as possible. We want this to be a place of inspiration, personal and professional development, and simply a place where we can elevate education together. Welcome to Teachers Talkin'. Welcome to Teachers Talkin'. As always, I am here with my co-host Ghazali, and today we are extremely excited to be welcoming Robert Barnett, who is co-founder of the Modern Classrooms Project and author of Meet Every Learner's Needs. Robert's work has impacted over 80,000 educators worldwide, guiding them in creating classrooms where all students can thrive. So our discussion today is going to dive into the transformational potential of hybrid and blended learning and explore how Robert's book can help educators to rethink traditional methods so that we can meet every learner's needs. So, Robert, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your journey, the inspiration behind your book, and what led you to focus on hybrid and blended learning?
Well, thanks, Dustin and Ghazali. I'm thrilled to be here and looking forward to the conversation. About 10 years ago, I was a teacher. I taught high school math in Washington, D.C. public schools, and I was really struggling. Like, I would go to work, I would stand in front of my class, I would see students who were right on pace and doing great. I would see students who were years behind. I had one class, first period pre-calculus class, with about 20 students, and sometimes when the bell rang, there would be 5 kids in the room. And by the end of class, there would be 10. So absenteeism was a huge problem. This was before COVID. And I just felt like I really did not know what to do. I didn't know how to reach these students. And I would go home every evening and I would just feel like I had failed. Like I hadn't done my job of reaching all the students. I needed to find a different way. What I did is I tried a bunch of things and I found an approach that worked. I redesigned my lessons so that instead of me standing at the front of the room, I was recording my direct instruction on video and spending my time working closely with students, which I really liked. This also let students, if they came in late, they just picked up where they left off. If they missed class, they could catch up at home, or they could, pick up where they left off when they came back to class. They could move at their own pace. I could make sure they really understood things before moving from lesson 1 to lesson 2, which is so important in math and in every subject too. So anyways, it took me some time to figure out how to teach in this way, how to meet my students' needs. But once I did, I was really much happier as a teacher, felt much more successful. I ended up sharing this with a colleague downstairs named Kareem Farah. He did this. He loved it. We got some attention from other teachers in our district. We said, let's start a nonprofit. We started Modern Classrooms Project about 6.5 years ago, basically just to train our colleagues. They didn't have computers. We needed to raise money to buy computers for their classes. So we trained 8 colleagues in 2018. We trained 25 in 2019. COVID came. There was a huge surge of interest in our model. Even though our model was not designed for remote instruction, it was designed for in-person instruction. People were just interested, like, how can we use technology? How can we meet learners' needs, given that they're all over the place in terms of their skills, their attendance? And we've just continued growing since then. I think you mentioned in the intro that we've reached over 80,000 teachers all over the world. It's been a great experience. I've learned a ton from connecting with teachers. I think what I realized, and I know this is a long introduction, so I'll wrap it up momentarily. I think what I realized is we've now shared our approach so much, and we have so many materials to help teachers teach this way. But I think the story of where this approach came from, the story that I've just told, was kind of missing. We weren't explaining why did we start teaching this way in the first place, and how did we come up with this approach. And so I wrote a book called Meet Every Learner's Needs, really to tell that story and also tell it in a way that a reader can follow along themselves. So I think if you're a teacher and you want to, this model, if you look at our instructional model, you might say, wow, this is complicated. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving pieces. But if you can follow the story of first I did this, then I did this, then I introduced this practice, really step by step, the way that I developed this model, I think it'll make teachers feel, it'll make you feel if you read the book, like, hey, I can do this. Rob was a teacher. He did it in his classroom. I'm a teacher. I can do it in my classroom, or I'm an administrator. I'm a parent. Teachers that I know can do this too. And so the book is really meant to tell the story and break down in a very simple way how to use the modern classroom model. Okay, long introduction. Hope that is sufficient.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You mentioned about how you started off this modern classroom project, which is quite exciting for me because it seems that you have solved the problem of student engagement. In your book, you explain why traditional teaching methods often fail to support all learners. So could you share with our listeners more about these limitations to start off with?
Of course. I mean, I wouldn't say I've solved anything. Student engagement is so difficult. Students come to us with so many needs. And so, I taught using this method for many years. I was never perfect. I never had the solution, but I did have techniques that helped me do a lot better than I had done when I was teaching traditionally from the board. When I think about what's the problem with traditional instruction, I think about that first period pre-calculus class that I taught. There were some students there who their skills were at a 12th grade level. They were eager to learn. They liked math. They really wanted to learn. And I felt like I needed to challenge them. There were also students in that class who had 6th grade, 4th grade math skills. They had never really been successful in math. They didn't like math. They didn't think they were capable in math. And I knew I needed to support them. And then, like I said, there were a bunch of students who were absent. So they'd come in halfway through class, or they'd miss 2 days and they'd come in, on the 3rd day. And if I was going to deliver a single lesson to whichever students happened to be in the room, there was just no way that a single lesson could meet all their needs. If I taught at a 12th grade level, the students who were behind would be lost and they'd feel inadequate. If I taught at a 6th or 4th grade level, those students who were, who had pre-calculus level skills would be totally bored. If I tried to teach in the middle, then I wouldn't really address either of their needs, and the students who were absent would miss out altogether. So I kind of realized teaching the same lesson to all of your students the same day, for me in the school where I was, it wasn't going to work. And it was really disorienting because that's how I had been trained to teach. That's how I had been taught as a student, right? Your teacher comes in, gives one lesson. It worked okay for me as a student. I made it through school. I did well in school. But for a lot of students, it doesn't work well. And so that's when I realized I need to figure out, if I have an advanced student, a struggling student, and an absent student, how do I design a lesson and then a course that meets all their needs, that provides challenge, provides support, and helps them catch up?
Yep, and I think that is the precisely what we need in a lot of our classrooms today, because the range of students that we have, we're talking about differentiated instruction, flipped classrooms. So there are many methodology that is trying to address this. So when you looked at designing your methodology, did you look at other methodology and then combine, or did you look at something that was more unique or more innovative, and you wanted to create your own pathway? What went through your mind? What were you thinking when you designed this modern classroom project?
Great question. I mean, one thing that I was not thinking was I want to design a new approach to instruction. Like, that sort of came a few years later when I realized what I had stumbled into. I would say what I was looking for was just simple strategies, like how can I go to school tomorrow and leave at the end of the day and feel like I did right by all of my students. So it was really like those simple, I was just looking for simple steps, anything that could help. The first thing I did is I realized giving one lesson at a time, it's not going to work, like I just said. So let me try putting lessons on video. I had a teacher in my same district who showed me how to do that, and that was, I guess, what you'd call a flipped classroom. I hope students would watch the video on their own time, and then they'd come in and we'd work together in class. But then I realized a couple problems. Number one, my students didn't all have internet access or computers at home, so it wasn't really fair to them to expect them to watch. And number two, my students were ready to move at different paces. Like I just said, some students had 12th grade skills, some students had 4th grade skills. And so some students wanted to move ahead quickly, other students needed more time. And so the sort of standard flipped classroom, where we all do the same thing in class together, it was a little bit better, but it still wasn't meeting my students' needs. So once I had the videos, then I said, maybe now I can let my students pace themselves a little bit. Maybe I can let one student complete this lesson in 30 minutes, and then the next student could take the full class or could take 2 classes. But then I said, well, how do I know that the student has actually completed the lesson? I need to have some kind of assessment to make sure that Dustin is ready, to go from lesson 1 to lesson 2. So I introduced something called a mastery check. And then I said, this is getting confusing. Some of my students are showing mastery, others aren't. I can't keep this all in my head. I need a way to track their progress. So then I came up with a spreadsheet, which we now call the progress tracker at Modern Classroom. So it wasn't like I sat down and said, this is how instruction should be. It was kind of like I tried one thing and it addressed some problems but caused others. So then I tried something else, I added another piece here and there. And it was sort of building piece by piece that I got to the point by the end of the year where I said, this approach really works. And that's part of the reason for writing the book, is to show this is a step-by-step thing that developed logically and based on need, instead of me sitting down, thinking a bunch and saying, here's how to teach. It wasn't like that for me. It really was created in my classroom by figuring out what I and my students needed.
Rob, you kind of started to talk a little bit about, the needs that your students had from the perspective of like where they were skill wise, or, even showing up to school. But can you give the listeners a little bit more into what the demographics of the school were like? Like what was that situation like for you? What kind of students were you working with when you developed this kind of model?
Sure, yeah. I was teaching at Eastern Senior High School, which was a Title I school in Washington, D.C. public schools, very low performing school. Students were, I think, in math, about 1% were proficient. Most were on free and reduced lunches, which means they were below federal poverty guidelines. It was really a struggling school. But I will say, after I left Eastern, I actually taught at a boarding school in Switzerland called Liaison American School, which is one of the top schools in the world, really. And when I was there, I noticed the exact same challenges with teaching and learning. You had a class of 25, 30 students at Eastern High School, where some of them couldn't afford breakfast. And I had a class of 10 students at Liaison American School who are about as privileged as students can be. They're very different in that way, but in any class of students, you have some that are ready to move faster, you have some that need more support, and you have some that are absent. Or Liaison American School was a boarding school, so there wasn't a lot of absence, but still students would be distracted. Kids have things going on in their lives, and so they don't, even if they're in class, they don't always show up emotionally prepared to learn on that day. So the teaching and learning needs were exactly the same at Eastern High School, and one of the best schools in the world. And that was a moment of realization for me, like, this isn't just something that works in your underserved urban schools. This is something that everyone needs. And I now have 2 young kids of my own. They're just beginning their academic careers, but I think like this is what I want for them. I don't know who they'll be when they get to high school math. They might love math and excel in it and want challenge. They might hate math and, especially with a math teacher as their dad, they might hate math and need support. Like, I don't know, but I do know that I want their teacher to use an approach that meets their individual needs and doesn't just treat them like, another kid based on their age. So I developed the model in one context. I used it with equal effect and need in a very different context. And I'm hoping that, the public schools where I live now, they're not Eastern, but they're also not liaison American school. They're probably your relatively average American, public schools. And I think the approach I used can work in the schools in my neighborhood too.
So tell us then a little bit about how do hybrid and blending learning models create a more inclusive environment for students with all these diverse needs, right? You're talking about kids in two completely different settings. They have some of the same needs. They also have some very different needs for one another. So how is it that these types of models create that inclusive learning environment to meet all of those different needs?
Great question. I always try to put myself in the student's shoes and think about how does the student feel when they walk into the room. And if you're a very advanced student and you walk into a traditional class, you might feel like, okay, today's going to be pretty boring. I'm not going to learn anything new. I'm just going to try to stay awake. If you're a student who's struggling, who has big gaps in your learning, you might walk into the same class and say, I really hope I can keep up today, but probably I can't. And I'm not really good at school anyways. So I'm just going to try to get through the day. And then if you've missed a couple of days, you'll come back and you'll say, oh man, what did I miss? Like I'm going to be in trouble here in this class. And so students come into the classroom feeling different ways already. I think what I want students to feel when they walk into the classroom is today I can succeed in learning something new, and my teacher can help me get there. And if we just thought about how can we make every student feel that way, I think we would teach in a different way. The teacher giving one lesson at a time, it doesn't make students feel that way. But if the students walk in and they say, today I can come in, I can pick up where I left off, whether that is advanced extensions or that's working on prerequisite skills, or that's the lesson from 3 days ago because I missed the past 2 days. I can pick up where I left off. I can learn on my own with videos that my teacher has created, with my classmates doing practice. And when I have a question, I don't have to raise my hand and interrupt the class and feel like I might be asking a stupid question. I can just raise my hand and the teacher will come over to me and answer it one-on-one. And if I'm having a bad day, I can just tell the teacher that, and I might be able to talk to the teacher about it instead of sort of sitting anonymously with all these other kids listening to the teacher talk on and on. And so I think if we thought about, how students feel, we'd do things differently. One thing I talk about in the book often is the goal is really every student to be appropriately challenged and appropriately supported every day. That's the goal. That's as clearly as I can state it. When you walk into the class, I want you to feel like there's something appropriately challenging for you to do, not too hard, not too easy. And that when you need support, I'll give you your support or your classmate can give you a support. That way, every student gets what they need.
Yes, that's very interesting from the student's perspective. Now I want to move towards the teacher's perspective. You mentioned that you started this modern classroom project around the time of COVID, right? So it was already there. I'm very interested to know, how do you manage to scale this project so fast? How do you manage to reach 80,000 teachers worldwide so fast? Because I think Dustin and I really want to know, how do you manage to spread something so what we would maybe consider virally so quickly and help so many teachers? I think that's the secret sauce that we want to know.
Well, I don't know that it's a secret sauce. I think we were, when I speak with my co-founder Kareem about this, we say we were in the right place at the right time. Meaning I started teaching this way in 2014. Kareem started teaching this way in 2016. So we had some time to really refine this approach and feel confident in using it by the time we started Modern Classrooms, which was 2018. Then we trained teachers in 2018 and 2019. So we had sort of 2 years to figure out what makes for an effective teacher training. And then COVID came, and that's when everyone was interested. So we had the time to refine the approach to be ready for when teachers were sort of saying, like, help. I can't give one lesson to all my students every day because they're not on they're on Zoom, or they're not on Zoom, or they're absent. Like, it was just so many challenges. So we were in the right place at the right time. In terms of how we grew, I think we identified something that a lot of teachers, maybe every teacher, struggles with, which is anytime you have more than one learner in front of you, you're going to have different needs. And so in some ways, it's the fundamental challenge of teaching. And we're helping teachers, this is not just a great discussion strategy for 8th grade math. That's very valuable, but this is universal. Any teacher, kindergarten teachers, university professors, they deal with the same challenge. So I think one way that we grew was just by having something universal. Another way we grew is by making all of our materials available for free. We're a nonprofit organization, and if you go to the Modern Classrooms website, you'll see a free online course that has all of our training materials available to teachers for free. That's part of our mission. And, I would love for you to buy the book and read it, but you do not need to buy the book. My publisher won't like me saying this. You don't need to buy the book to learn the model. Go to our website, take the free course. If you want the story, if you want, a really detailed guide, you can buy the book, but this is all free for teachers to learn. And then I think really once we had something that worked for a universal problem and something free that could spread, it really just was word of mouth. One teacher learned about it, they shared it with another teacher. Dustin, I don't know where you learned about it, but I know Dustin, you learned about this, you mastered it, you were an excellent Modern Classroom educator. So somehow it struck a chord with you as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was as simple as we were in COVID and I heard Kareem on a podcast just like this. And that's part of my hope today, right? Is that here you are talking and promoting your book, but also just talking about a model that is truly impactful for both teachers and students to make teaching a more sustainable practice and to be able to reach more students. And so for me, it was, I heard the podcast. I was like, oh, that sounds very interesting and like something that we need. And I went and did the free course. And then my journey went on from there. I ended up doing the mentorship program and so on and so forth. So, I mean, and then I loved it so much that I was like, oh, let me tell this teacher, let me tell this teacher, let me tell this teacher. So, I think very much word of mouth. So.
Yeah. Well, I hope this podcast has the same effect. And it's true. I have a book to promote, but I really see the book as an opportunity just to share the practices. And if you're listening to this, I would say before you buy the book, go see the free course, right? See if this approach is interesting to you, is appealing to you. There are things in the free course that a book can't provide, right? There's videos in the free course, there are templates, there are resources. That's all free to use. Go use it. I think what the book provides is more of an in-depth sort of story-based approach. And I like having a book too, because I just think, a book you can focus on in a way that an online course makes difficult. But yeah, my first piece of advice to you is check out the free resources first. If that's interesting to you, to get the book. But what I more want is to spread the ideas and hopefully spread some tools that make your life as a teacher a little bit easier.
I'll definitely get the book. You've made it sound so interesting, so exciting. I love stories, and I would really like to know how you got this modern classroom project started. But since you already mentioned the book, can you give us a bit of insight, like how long did it take you to write the book? How many pages is it? Is it going to be on Amazon? How much are you going to charge us for this? You know, I know your knowledge is valuable. I'll pay whatever you ask for. So tell us more about the book.
Well, I think I'll just say you can go to meeteverylearnersneeds.org and find the most updated information. As soon as I say, you know, the price is this, it will change. And so I'll just say meeteverylearnersneeds.org, and that's plenty of promotion for the book. I mean, in terms of the writing process, to write this all out, it was not difficult. It's what I did in my classroom. I just had to explain it, and what I've been helping teachers like you, Dustin, or like other teachers do for the past 6 years. I will tell you the part that was hardest by far is modern classrooms is a movement and a community of teachers. And I didn't want it to be just my voice. And so I realized every time I share a strategy, I want to find a quote from a teacher who's using this strategy and put that in the book. That would be other perspectives. That would also show like the diversity of this community of teachers. I have a kindergarten teacher in there. I have a university professor. I have a principal. There are teachers in, I don't know how many states are represented in the book, but I know we have quotes from teachers in Israel and Australia and Zambia, Sweden, Mexico, Brazil. So I just wanted to illustrate sort of the diversity of teachers and also the expertise of teachers in this community, because there are teachers doing the techniques that I talk about way better than I ever did, right? I walk into classrooms sometimes and I say, oh my God, I want to be a teacher again, so I can use what I'm seeing here in this classroom. That was extremely difficult to figure out which teachers' tips to feature, because there were just so many. Like there are so many teachers out there who use these practices, who can speak to them eloquently. How to find the right mix, the right balance. That that took me as long as writing the book. I am proud to share. There's a great quote from Dustin in there, in the section about whole class instruction. Teachers sometimes say, "Wait a sec, I thought modern classroom was against whole class instruction," and I say, no, whole class instruction can be very valuable at times. It's a great way to build community at the start and end of class. Sometimes you might want to do a Socratic seminar or a simulation or a game or a lab where you need the whole class. That's great. Do that. It's just not, it shouldn't be your default method of instruction, and it's not the best way to deliver direct sort of lecture-based instruction. But Dustin, maybe you could share more about what you did, but Dustin just had a really good quote where he talked about like the ways he used whole class instruction, and how he prepared his students for that. So Dustin's in there. I think there's 45 teachers in total. A lot of work to do that. Yeah, Dustin, maybe you can give people a preview of your quote by sharing what you did with whole class instruction.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it was about I didn't want students to come in and just get straight to doing their own thing. And so it was always, I started in a very traditional way with, kids coming in, welcoming them, and starting with a do now, where we did for me, I was teaching 11th and 12th grade English. So we started with SAT question of the day. And then students went into their progress tracker and they set goals based on what pace should I be on? What pace am I on? What lesson am I on? What do I want to accomplish in class today? That actually gave me just the opportunity of taking attendance for one, and just making sure the class was ready to go. But then once I went over that question, I then had time to give announcements to the class, talk about where they should be, what they have coming up. Don't forget that this is due on this day. You have this assessment coming up or whatever, before I would launch them into that self-paced time. And so that just really brought us together at the beginning of every single class period. And to close classes, it was a matter of just doing a little bit of reflecting. What did you learn today? What did you accomplish today? Are you on pace by the time you left today? If not, what do you need to do differently? So it was a constant like reflection of just, what am I learning and how do I want to get better? So, and it kind of like bookended the class really. And then in the middle, students did their thing. They worked on what they needed to work on. And then I had the opportunity of meeting kids where they were, working with kids one-on-one, pulling in small groups and having conversations, facilitating reassessments. There's a lot of other things that I could do when I wasn't the focal point of the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing that. I love that. That's an example of something that I'm learning from teachers. Like I had an opening routine, I think pretty similar to yours. I never really got my closing routine down. I feel like I sort of wanted the students to work as much as they could through the period, and at the end, it was the bell would ring and people sort of like put the computers back and just left. But now I've seen really good closing routines where teachers are doing things like reflection and shout outs, and it makes me think, huh, I wish I had known that when I was teaching. But that's the reason for featuring teachers in the book, is because, I think I used this model pretty well. Certainly it worked for me, but there's so much wisdom in the modern classroom community. And the challenge in the book was narrowing that down. I think Dustin, you and 1,000 other educators could each write a book about how you use this model, and it would be worth reading. So how to pick and choose from those pieces was a big challenge.
So what would you say then for educators who are, you said go to the free course, but for educators who are thinking about redesigning their instruction, what would you say are some practical research-backed strategies that they could implement to get started?
Yeah, I think they're really, if you walk into a full modern classroom like yours, Dustin, you might say, oh my God, this is so different. Like I can't do this. This is totally different from what I was taught. Like it's so much work. But really there are small steps that I think teachers can take right away. If you're listening to this, you can do this later today or tomorrow and it will help. I think the first thing that I recommend teachers do, in general and also in the book, is digitize your direct instruction. So if you're going to be explaining something to your students tomorrow, try explaining that on a video instead. And if that sounds intimidating to you, just think about this. If you can get on a video call, you can record a video. You can start a Zoom call or a Google Meet call with yourself, hit the record button, explain something, and stop recording. Now you have a video, right? Simple as that. It doesn't need to be fancy. It's you, it's personal. And once you have that video, a couple things happen. First of all, you never have to repeat yourself again. So I often taught the same class 3 times in a day. By the end of the day, I would be so tired of repeating the same thing. Now I had the video and all my students watched that video. Your students can watch that video at home. Their families can watch that video if they want to get to know you, if they want to support their students. And you're free in class to do whatever you want. And it's not just this year, it's the rest of your career. You have a video you can use. So takes a little time to figure out how to record a video, sure, but digitize that direct instruction and you're already saving yourself time. In the long run, you have a great resource for your students. Then you might have to think, okay, what are my students going to do after the video? Well, they're not just going to be sitting listening to you. You might give them some practice work to do together. For me, I would just have a worksheet of math problems and I'd say, watch the video and then find a classmate or a couple classmates and work on these problems together. That's a pretty good way of learning math, really, students together working. If you're an English teacher, you might say, okay, watch this video, write 1 paragraph, share it with a friend, edit each other's work, or just something that gets students off screens working together to apply what they've learned. And then once you have a video and something for them to do, the last piece of the lesson is some kind of mastery check. Do my students actually understand this objective? If yes, great. They move to the next video. If not, you don't really want them moving on because they're not going to be prepared. So you have to say, okay, if my student doesn't get it, what am I going to do to help them? And then what's the reassessment to make sure that they understand it before they advance? And like, that's different, but it's not that hard. You can do that today. You can start a video call with yourself and explain something and get that link and put it in your learning management system, and you have a video. You have something for students to do afterwards. You have a mastery check. I think if you do that a couple times, you're really going to start to see a difference in the way your students experience class and in the way you experience class. And it's not so hard to start.
So what advice would you say you have for educators who want to inspire and lead change in their schools towards, a more inclusive and adaptive learning model like this?
Well, I'll give a couple caveats first. The first is that if everything is going perfectly well in your class, like, you can ignore everything I'm saying, right? You don't need to use this model if you feel like your students are all excelling to the best of their ability. This is really only if you feel like there are students who can do a little more. So, most teachers I know do feel like that, but there's no need to do this if you don't think it's going to solve a problem. The other caveat is, if you think this isn't going to work for you, or you try it and it doesn't work for you, like, I trust you, I believe you, right? You should only do this if you think it's going to work. And there's that old apocryphal quote, those who think they can and those who think they can't are both right. I think that's true of this model as well. If you think it will work, it will. If you think it won't, it won't. And so I trust your judgment as an educator as to whether this will work. In terms of your question, which I think was about sort of leading wider change, I'm a big believer in leading by example, doing this model myself, and then letting other people see what I was doing. And that's how the Modern Classrooms Project was born, right? I was not intending to start a nonprofit or write a book. I was teaching in a way that made me feel happy. My colleague Kareem downstairs was stressed. He saw that I was relaxed. He said, "Hey, Rob, can I come visit your classroom?" He visited my classroom. The next day, he went home and he recorded a video and he started teaching like this. He was happier. I started learning from him. He was learning from me. We were collaborating. That's how it started. I didn't give him a big book and say, "Kareem, this is how you should teach. Trust me." I used it in my classroom. I invited him in and he saw it. And so I think if you want to lead change, that's the first way to do it, is use this model yourself, invite other people in, help them do what you're doing, and then learn from them when they do things better than you, which always happens. I learned it, even though I was doing this first before Kareem, I learned a ton from him about how to do it better. And that was a privilege for me to have that learning. So that's really the first thing to do. I think once you have done that, then you can think a little bit. You can think a little bigger. I wrote an article in my local paper about what I was doing that was published while I was teaching at Eastern, that shared what I'm doing, what you're doing, Dustin, with the podcast and with a newsletter. Like, you can write things and share them. Modern Classrooms Project has helped a lot of teachers write articles that are published in various publications explaining what they do and why. And then Modern Classrooms Project also has more formal leadership opportunities for teachers. So you can share evidence of your teaching practice and become what we call a distinguished modern classroom educator. That means we recognize you, we celebrate you, we give you some, small perks. And once you do that, you can also become a mentor. And when you're a modern classroom mentor, you work, we pair you with teachers all over the world who want to learn this model, and you work to support them, sort of as a tutor in a way, as a mentor to those teachers. So there are a lot of ways you can share this, but it starts with using it yourself, inviting people in, sharing your story, no different from the way I'm doing. Six years ago, the first year and a half that Modern Classrooms existed, I was also teaching. Kareem was also teaching. We were high school teachers, and so we were trying to share this. But first and foremost, we were inviting people in, and that's what has led to everything that has followed.
Okay, now I need to pick your brains on my area of expertise. I want to know if you plan on integrating AI into your modern classroom project, if there are anything that you can change, modify with regards to this huge movement that we see now, AI in education. How will it change the modern classroom project, if it will even, if you see any benefit of changing for the sake of AI? I'd like to know your perspective on this.
Well, I'm always nervous about getting into other people's areas of expertise. One thing that I would say about Modern Classrooms is that even though we help teachers use technology with videos and with, a learning management system, like, we really do this work because we believe in learning as a fundamentally human endeavor. And so you might walk into a Modern Classroom and you might not see that many students on devices at all. That's by design. That's because the video replaces one very narrow piece of the lesson, which is direct instruction. And the real goal of a Modern Classroom is to have people working together face to face. And so, we like technology, but only as a tool for that human interaction. I think AI can serve a similar role in enhancing human interaction. And so I really like AI as a tool that makes, teacher planning and teacher workload easier. That's what I was saying about recording videos, right? It feels like a lot of work, but actually it makes your life as a teacher much easier because you don't have to repeat yourself, right? The computer is replacing a human function that would be very tedious because the computer can just repeat itself over and over and over, where a human can't do that. And I think AI can do that as well. We've actually worked with a company called TeachFlows at Modern Classrooms Project that has built a self-paced lesson generator using AI. So you go to the TeachFlows website, you type in what you want to teach about, and TeachFlows will create slides you can use to create a video. It will suggest practice activities your students can do. It will come up with a draft of a mastery check. And so this sort of thing, there's less time that teachers need to spend planning, and teachers can therefore focus on human interaction in class. That's where I think AI can be powerful. I am, to be honest, skeptical of a lot of student-facing AI, things like chatbots, because I think that means students spend a lot of time in front of screens. That's not how I wanted my classroom to work. It's not particularly how I want my kids to learn. But if AI can free up teacher capacity to work more closely with my kids in their school and make it easier for students to collaborate with one another face to face, I'm all for that.
Oh, that's really very interesting. What about this TeachFlows? Is it part of your Modern Classroom project? Is it part of the free aspect of it, or do you have to subscribe to be able to use TeachFlows?
Yeah, so this is this is a company that's based in Australia that we've partnered with, and we just have similar vision about how education should be. They have free tools and they have premium tools, and we do provide the premium tools at the moment to teachers who are in our mentorship program. We also recommend the free tool and helped TeachFlows develop a free tool for Modern Classroom educators as well, just because it's part of our nonprofit mission is having free tools, and then we do have some premium tools as well. As with things on the book and the price and where to get it, this is a world that changes very fast, and by the time, by this time next year, there may be a totally different tool with totally different functionality, or I may have a new perspective on AI. I'm learning all the time as well. So, at the moment, Teach Flows is the best tool we have. We like it, we recommend it. But I think what I want to convey more is just, if you're a modern classroom teacher, look for things that make your planning easier. Look for things that help you interact with your students, not replace that fundamental kind of human connection that I think is so essential to learning.
Awesome. This has been a super fun conversation and super informative. Thank you so much. Before we kind of wrap things up, Rob, I'm just curious if there's anything else you would like to share about modern classrooms, about hybrid and blending learning, or about the book Every Learner's Needs.
I think what I would recommend anyone listening to this to do is just give it a try. Say that you record 3 lessons on video and you let your students move at their own paces for 3 lessons over 3 days. You're going to learn a ton in that experience. Your students will learn also, and then you can see, did this improve my experience as a teacher? Did this improve my learners' experiences? If not, you can go back to what you're doing and you'll just go back with a bunch of new skills. My gut is that if you try teaching this way, you're going to like it. And, I hear all the time, I wouldn't go back to traditional teaching again, because I think teachers recognize that 1 lesson per day to all your students is not the best way of teaching, but teachers don't necessarily see an alternative because it's so pervasive. It's what's expected. It's how we learned. And so what I'm trying to do with Modern Classrooms Project, with the book, is suggest an alternative, and not just as a theory or idea, but as a set of small steps that you can take today to do something different. If you take those small steps and they don't work for you, no problem. It doesn't bother me. Do what you think is best for your students. You're a teacher and I trust you. But my guess is you will find something in our free course, in the book, that's going to help you. And I really hope that you do.
And I would add too that, modern classrooms, it's a model, and there's things that people are going to find useful, and there's other things that people are going to say that's not for me. And I think it's always good to know that that's okay. I've been in a lot of different classrooms that use this model, and I've never seen any classroom be exactly the same as the previous one. And everybody just puts their own spin on things, does what they know to do for the kids that they serve best, and uses the model to enhance what they do to make it stronger. And I think that's one of my favorite things, is knowing that these are some ways that you can go about doing things, but it's about folding that into all of the other things that you already do well and making it your own. And I think that there's a lot of power in that.
I agree. And I wouldn't say just that that's okay. I would say that's by design. That's how it should be. Don't teach like me, teach like yourself.
Yeah.
Just use some of the techniques that I found to enhance your own humanity in the classroom.
Ghazali, any final words from you, sir?
Yep, I like the idea that you can't replace the teacher in the classroom, but the role of the teacher is more specific in this particular model, in the sense that you are giving one-to-one, more of one-to-one teacher-student interaction, and the others are still learning at the same time. And after that, you can close the gaps, because the one-to-one interaction helps to close the gaps for those who are perhaps slower or need the help of the teachers. So I like the adaptability and flexibility of the system, of the design, and I think I would definitely give it a try.
That's all I recommend you do. Thanks for sharing that.
Well, Rob, again, just thank you so much for joining us today and having this conversation. We really appreciate it. It was very insightful, and we hope that all of you listeners also got a lot of benefit out of this. So remember to like and subscribe and review and share the podcast, because we love to reach as many educators as we can and offer as much support as we can. And if you are an educator out there and you would love to be a guest on our podcast, we would like to have you. You don't need to be an expert in anything, just passionate about education and somebody who likes to talk. So as always, thank you for tuning in, and we will talk to you next time. Thanks, everybody.